Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we bring you tales of compassion, resilience, and transformation. In today's story, we follow DeAndre, a young man whose selfless act of kindness changes the lives of not only a stranger but his entire family. Get ready to be inspired by this unforgettable journey of hope and growth. It was another ordinary morning in the quiet streets of suburban Oak Ridge. DeAndre, a young black teenager, was making his way down the road in his aging car. The engine sputtered as he gripped the wheel tightly, his worn grocery store uniform snug against his skin. He had always been careful to manage his time well. There was no room for mistakes. Not with the responsibilities he carried. His mother's health was fragile. His younger siblings were depending on him. And his shift at the local grocery store was in just 20 minutes. Being late wasn't an option. But today, the ordinary was about to turn extraordinary. As DeAndre navigated the winding streets, his eyes caught sight of something unusual up ahead, a sleek black sedan, its front end deeply embedded in a ditch. It was an odd sight in the quiet neighborhood, and DeAndre's curiosity was piqued. As he drew closer, something caught his attention, a weak, feeble arm raised from the grass, reaching out for help. Without thinking, DeAndre's foot eased off the gas, and his car came to a halt at the edge of the road. His heart skipped a beat as he saw the man, a middle-aged stranger, sharply dressed in a suit, blood trickling down his temple, his body battered and bruised. The man's lips moved in faint gasps, barely audible over the breeze. But DeAndre caught the words. "Help, hospital." DeAndre's mind raced. He glanced at the man, then at the car, a sleek, expensive vehicle now utterly useless in the ditch. A sense of urgency swept over him. And before he knew it, he was out of his car, sprinting toward the injured man. The task wasn't easy. The man was heavier than DeAndre had anticipated, his limbs limp and uncooperative as DeAndre struggled to help him. Blood was trickling from the stranger's head, and his leg was twisted in an unnatural angle. DeAndre's stomach churned. But he knew he couldn't leave him there. His father's words echoed in his mind, "You help people when they need it, no matter the cost." With a grunt, DeAndre managed to maneuver the man into his car. The old sedan groaned under the pressure as he slammed the door shut. "Hang on, man," DeAndre muttered to himself as much as to the stranger beside him. His hands were sweating as he gripped the steering wheel, trying to push the engine harder. The car rattled, but it started, and soon DeAndre was speeding toward the hospital. His heart was in his throat as he drove, his eyes darting between the road and the man who lay in the passenger seat, struggling to stay conscious. The hospital was just up ahead. DeAndre's chest tightened as he pulled into the parking lot and threw the car into park. He jumped out and ran toward the ER entrance, shouting for help. Nurses rushed out, and as they wheeled the man inside, DeAndre stepped back. Relief flooded through him, but it was quickly replaced with a heavy, gnawing unease. He had done everything he could, but now he was late. He had missed his shift at work. The weight of that realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Still, he couldn't help but replay the events in his mind. Had he done the right thing? Was the man going to be okay? Would his life be the same after this? He didn't have time for answers. His job awaited, and he had to face the consequences. DeAndre climbed back into his rattling car, the engine sputtering as he drove to the grocery store. His mind was filled with conflicting emotions, pride for helping a stranger, frustration for being late, and a sinking feeling that no good deed goes unpunished. As he pulled into the lot, he braced himself. The store manager, Mr. Thompson, was waiting at the door. "You're late," DeAndre, Mr. Thompson said, his tone cold. His arms crossed over his crisp white shirt. His icy blue eyes locked onto DeAndre, piercing through him like a blade. I know, sir, DeAndre said, trying to explain. I had to help someone. There was a man in a ditch. I had to take him to the hospital. Mr. Thompson's expression didn't soften. Instead, he scoffed. A man in a ditch? Really? You expect me to believe that? You're late. And that's all that matters here. DeAndre's chest tightened. It's not an excuse. Sir, I saved his life. Mr. Thompson sneered. The only life you need to worry about is your own. Late is late. DeAndre, you're fired. Pack up your things and go. The words hit DeAndre harder than he expected. Fired. For being late. For saving a life. His mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. But there was no time for explanations. Mr. Thompson had already made up his mind. DeAndre turned and walked to the back room, his head heavy with disbelief. How had it come to this? He had done the right thing. But here he was, jobless and facing an uncertain future. The world seemed cruel. But DeAndre didn't let the sting of the moment break him. He had always known life was tough. But he hadn't expected kindness to come with such a price. As he left the store, DeAndre's mind was awash with thoughts of his family. His mother, struggling with her health, and his younger siblings, depending on him more than ever. Yet, despite everything, he knew one thing for sure: he had done the right thing. The morning after the accident, DeAndre found himself sitting in the quiet of his modest home, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had unfolded the day before. He had never imagined that stopping to help a stranger would alter the course of his life so dramatically. The sting of losing his job still lingered. But a new kind of pressure had settled over him. He needed to figure out how to take care of his family, especially his ailing mother and younger siblings. The phone rang, snapping him from his thoughts. He hesitated before answering, unsure of who it could be. "Hello," he said, his voice guarded. "Hello. Is this DeAndre?" The voice on the other end was warm, but there was an underlying urgency in the tone. "This is Evelyn Miller. My husband Anthony was the man you helped yesterday. We've been trying to track you down. We owe you more than just thanks." DeAndre's heart skipped a beat. He had known that the man he saved was important, his fine clothes and the brief glimpse of recognition, but hearing from the Millers directly made everything feel more real. He never expected them to reach out. He had just done what felt right. I didn't do anything special," DeAndre stammered, not sure how to respond. "I just helped him out. Took him to the hospital." Evelyn's voice softened. "What you did wasn't just a simple favor. You saved his life, DeAndre. And for that, we're forever grateful." She paused before adding, "We'd like to meet with you. Can we come by?" DeAndre hesitated. He hadn't been prepared for such a gesture. Of course, he replied finally, "I'll be here." That afternoon, as DeAndre stood in the front yard, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of his house. His pulse quickened as the door opened. And out stepped Anthony Miller, the man DeAndre had helped, and his wife, Evelyn. They both looked out of place in the worn-down neighborhood, their polished appearance contrasting sharply with the crumbling houses around them. "Hello, DeAndre," Anthony said, his voice firm but full of appreciation. He extended his hand, and DeAndre shook it, still overwhelmed by the situation. "Thank you, man. You saved my life. And I'll never forget it. Anthony continued. This is my wife, Evelyn. She's been beside herself, worried about how we could ever repay you. Evelyn smiled warmly, though there was a sadness in her eyes that DeAndre couldn't quite place. We've been trying to find you to thank you properly. You went above and beyond. DeAndre felt the weight of their gratitude, but he couldn't shake the discomfort of his own situation. I didn't do it for thanks. It's just what I was raised to do. Anthony nodded, his expression deepening with admiration. That's what makes you different, DeAndre. Not many people would have done what you did. Most would have driven right past. But you didn't hesitate. That kind of integrity is rare. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes searching. And that's why we want to help you. We've seen the way you live, the challenges you face. You shouldn't have to struggle like this. DeAndre felt a lump form in his throat. Help? From people like the Millers? He glanced at his mother's worn-out house, the peeling paint and sagging roof that had been his reality for so long. He shook his head. I can't accept anything from you. I appreciate it, but I'm fine. Anthony raised his hand, halting him. You've been through enough, DeAndre. You're putting everyone else first. And it's time someone helped you. We want to make sure your family doesn't have to worry anymore. The words caught DeAndre off guard. He had always been the one providing, the one holding everything together for his family. The thought of receiving help, especially from strangers, was a difficult pill to swallow. I don't know what to say, DeAndre said, his voice shaky. You're offering so much already. I've lost my job. I'm barely keeping up with everything. Evelyn's voice was soft, but firm. That's exactly why we're here, DeAndre. We want to make sure you get back on your feet. Your mother's health, your siblings, all of it. We want to help with the medical bills. And if you need to move to a better place, we'll make that happen too. DeAndre's chest tightened as he processed their words. He had always thought that if he worked hard enough, things would get better. But the weight of his family's struggles, combined with the setback of losing his job, had left him feeling trapped. We'll also help you get back to school, Anthony added. You've given up a lot already, but your future deserves to be just as important as the sacrifices you've made. For the first time in a long while, DeAndre felt something stir within him, a flicker of hope. But it was quickly replaced by doubt. He couldn't accept this kind of help. I don't deserve all that. I've done nothing special, he said, his voice low. Evelyn reached out, placing a hand on his arm. You've done more than enough. And now it's time for someone else to give back. Let us help, DeAndre. He looked at them, the sincerity in their eyes evident. And for the first time in his life, he allowed himself to imagine a different future. One where his family didn't have to scrape by. Where he didn't have to bear the weight of everything alone. I'll think about it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. With that, the Millers left, but not before promising that they would return soon with a plan. DeAndre stood in the doorway, watching them drive away, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty swirling within him. He had done something that day, something he never expected would come back to him in this way. And now, he had to face the reality of accepting help, a gift he had always believed he couldn't afford. Weeks passed, and DeAndre found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions and changes. The Millers had kept their word. They didn't just offer help, they created an entirely new path for him and his family. The day they showed up at his house was the day his life began to shift. But even with their support, accepting help remained a struggle. DeAndre wasn't used to receiving, he was used to being the one who gave. Who took care of everything? The first significant change came in the form of his mother's medical care. When DeAndre's mother, Gloria, had been diagnosed with a chronic heart condition years ago, it felt like her health was the only thing standing between their family and a better life. With no insurance and mounting medical bills, they had learned to cope by cutting corners. But now, the Millers made sure Gloria received the best treatment possible. Her condition began to improve under the care of specialists. And with each visit, DeAndre noticed a light returning to her eyes that he hadn't seen in years. As for the house, the Millers arranged for a move to a safer, more stable home. The new house was far from extravagant, but it was a far cry from the dilapidated structure they had lived in. It had sturdy walls, clean floors, and a small garden that made the place feel like home. Terrell and Kira were thrilled to have a backyard to play in, and even Gloria felt more at peace with the changes. But the most profound shift came within DeAndre himself. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that there might be more to life than just surviving. It wasn't about luxury or wealth, it was about the possibility of a future where he could balance family, school, and his own dreams. The Millers had set up a meeting with the local community college, and DeAndre hesitated before walking into the office. He had never thought of going back to school, especially not after having to drop out a year ago. But when he sat down with the counselor, something inside him clicked. He could go back. He had to. "I can't thank you enough for all of this," DeAndre had said, sitting across from the counselor, his voice thick with emotion. "But I don't know if I'm cut out for school. I've been out of it for so long." The counselor had smiled kindly. "You're more than capable, DeAndre. You've already shown that. Your family's story is one of resilience. And that's the kind of strength that will get you through this." DeAndre enrolled in classes, and though he felt an overwhelming sense of insecurity at first, he found himself rising to the challenge. Each day, he worked hard to catch up, to push himself further. And slowly but surely, he regained the confidence he had long since lost. He spent hours studying, asking questions when he didn't understand, and dedicating time to learn outside the classroom. He even joined a study group with other students, something he had never done before. The sense of community he found was something he had never experienced in his previous school years. But the rewards were not just academic. As DeAndre excelled in his studies, he began to find a new purpose, a sense of self-worth that didn't depend on the survival of his family, but on his own growth. He felt a new sense of pride as he carried his books home each day, his backpack a symbol of something bigger than the weight he had always carried on his shoulders. Meanwhile, his relationship with the Millers deepened. Anthony and Evelyn were there for him, offering encouragement, advice, and the occasional check-in to ensure he had everything he needed. They were never overbearing, but they were steadfast in their support. Anthony even offered DeAndre a summer internship at Crawford Industries, giving him the opportunity to gain hands-on experience in business. It was a gift that DeAndre never expected, but one that proved to be a crucial stepping stone in his development. As the months went by, DeAndre's transformation became undeniable. His grades improved, his confidence soared, and he began to see a future for himself beyond his current struggles. He was no longer just the boy who had helped a stranger on the side of the road. He was a young man with ambition, hope, and the drive to succeed. Then came the day that would mark a turning point in his life. He received a scholarship offer from a prestigious business school. The weight of it was almost too much to comprehend. DeAndre had never imagined such a thing for himself. But here it was. An opportunity to change the course of his life. Standing in his new room, looking out at the small backyard where his siblings played, DeAndre realized just how far he had come. The road had been long, and there were still challenges ahead. But he was no longer burdened by the weight of uncertainty. He had hope now. He had a future. And as he read the letter once again, he felt his father's presence in his heart. The words his father had always said echoing in his mind, "You help people. Son. No matter what. You never give up." It wasn't just about helping others anymore, it was about helping himself. And with the Millers by his side, DeAndre knew that the impossible was no longer out of reach. Thank you for watching and joining us on this powerful journey of resilience and self-discovery. DeAndre's story is a reminder of the profound impact one act of kindness can have. Not just on others, but on ourselves. If you found this story inspiring, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more heartwarming tales.